to the two Jasons. Let me tell you guys, it has been about 2 months since we last did our very last episode. Jason has moved and we were busy, so we took a little bit of a break. We're back, and tonight we're going to be talking about each of us is going to come up with a list of our top 5 favorite Van Halen albums. So let's get into it, Jason. What is your number 5?
Wow. My number 5 is Van Halen 2.
Okay. That's definitely on my list. So let's talk about why that one's number 5 and why that album made your list.
Well, I'll tell you what. It's got some ferocious songs. I mean, not every song is a winner, you know. I mean, the Linda Ronstadt cover they could have left off, and it wouldn't hurt my feelings. No bit. You're no good.
Yeah.
But I get it. You know, they were trying to follow the formula of the first album, you know, sophomore album blues. Everything went great for this album, so let's do the exact same thing and it ought to go great. So we'll put one cover on and a bunch of rocking tunes and it ought to go great. Yeah, it didn't, because they also didn't have enough time. I mean, they had 6 weeks, so the story goes, in between tours, and the record company wanted to put them right back out and said, give us another album, stat. So they went back in. Honestly, most of those early albums were all demoed before the first album was recorded, because as we all know, Eddie Van Halen, all those songs were demos, even all the way up until the reunion album with Dave, which we'll get into later. So I mean, songs like, I mean, they did everything. Like they had a guitar solo, just like the first one. You had Eruption. On this one, you got Spanish Fly, which is acoustic. And dude, is brilliant. It set the pattern, really. Every album had a little something special instrumentally from Eddie. Had a good cover for Dave, and then had a lot of rockin' tunes, you know. And it's a good mix. In this album, you can see an equal representation of the guys in Van Halen that were writing those songs. Like before, or towards the end, you know, Dave was all covers, wants to do all the dance stuff. Well, Eddie wants to do the dark rock stuff. This album had it all. It had, you know, Out of Love, Somebody Get Me a Doctor, which was on their first, you know, they were doing that on their first tour. Dance the Night Away is a good, couple number 2 to the dance.
That's like a great pop tune. That's one of my favorite Van Halen tracks of all time, you know?
Whoa, yeah. And then, and then they had Light Up the Sky, which is a tune so damn good that, as you know, when my buddy Casey Trask and I, Casey, of course, playing, you know, Ace Frehley in our Kiss tribute band, Kissed Alive, as well as Cage out of San Diego, Monarch out of North San Diego. What else is this kid in?
Trauma. He did the last Trauma tour.
He got the last Trauma tour, yes. And don't be surprised if you ever see them again that he's not on stage with them. I would, if I was them, I would, you know.
I definitay think so, you know.
And he's also in the Three Tremors with Ripper Owens.
There you go. I mean, you're lucky to have him in your band. Well, you know. And,
so when we did our Van Halen band, that's the song that I actually lobbied to name the band Light Up the Sky, because I thought it's a really fierce tune, and it's my favorite song on that album, bar none.
Yeah, and you know, you make a couple great points, because back in the 70s, that's what all the labels would do, is like when they're especially trying to break a band, like let's get a great cover, you know, let's put a cover tune on. And I will say, I'm glad that Van Halen, if they had to do another cover, they didn't do what Quiet Riot did, was, we had a success with a Slade song, so we're going to put out another Slade song, you know. At least they went with a different artist, and like you said, Van Halen 2, that's definitely on my list. And I think Dance the Night Away, that's the track for me.
I love that. That always goes over well in our shows.
How many times have you heard that on the radio every day? How many movies has it been in? How many?
It never gets tiring.
Huh?
I never gets tired.
Yeah, I love the hook that runs through that song. You know, and so my number 5, I thought I had to include a Sammy era album, and I included For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. I'll tell you why.
That's on my list too.
First of all, I love the branding. I mean, Sammy came up with this huge, great marketing genius idea of, if you abbreviate those letters, it spells out F-U-C-K. And I just love that. And then I think of all the Sammy albums, it's kind of sonically got the best songs. I mean, I got a lot of love for 5150 because when that came out, me and myself, like a lot of people thought, how in the hell can they replace Dave? But I think they made the huge mistake also of not releasing any music videos. I mean, that was still big back, but at the same time, the album, in
I
spite of
think it
that,
worked out for him in history.
went number one, right? So whatever. But talking about Foreign Lawful Car, I mean, you had songs like I loved Top of the World. That was another great pop tune. I loved, Right Now. That was kind of different from the band. When we find out that song dates all the way back to 1984. It was originally recorded for the 1984 album, but they left it off. And they revisited it in 91, which is kind of it. You got Runaround, Pound Cake. Pound Cake, listen to that riff. And I always remember back in 91.
What about Dream Another Dream? The one
Yeah.
that starts off with, come on, man, wake up. Bam, bam. Just a great opening of a tune. I used to literally just those first two chords from the, hey, come on, man, wake up, then bam, bam. And then I would rewind it and play it again. Hey, come on, man, wake up. Bam, bam. Rewind it. Hey, come on, man, wake up. I would do that over and over again like a savant, dude. Seriously. I love that album.
And I don't know about, but I remember at the time when that album came out also, I don't know who came up with the concept first, but albums both came out around the same time, Mr. Big and this one. And they did Paul Gilbert and Eddie both did the drill thing. Like, for example, if you look at the Pound Cake video, I think Van Halen gets kind of a credit, but I think it was actually Paul Gilbert who did first.
The drill, yeah, I think he actually started doing it first.
Yeah.
But who knows who knows what.
Yeah.
But I love it. And I love those. It continued to be the great album names. You had like 1984. And then you had 5150, which was, LA Police Code.
OU812.
Yeah, OU812, And you know why they named that album OU812?
No, I'm not sure why.
I'll tell you why. Because it was in response to Dave's first solo album, Eat 'Em and Smile. So then their next, because they had 5150.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And then they had, what was the other one? OU812, right? But right around that time was Dave put out that album. When they put out 5150 and he put out Eat 'Em and Smile. So their next one was, U812.
Yeah, I always loved that. I was like, U812, what the hell is that? But it didn't even seem to matter. I just love the brilliance of it. Let's just come up with another wacky number for an album title.
Oh, U812? Eat 'Em and Smile.
Yeah. Okay, so what is your number 4 album?
My number 4, I might be in the minority. I don't know. With Van Halen fans of the original era, but my number 4 was actually A Different Kind of Truth, the reunion album with Dave when they got him back in the band after all those years.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, how are you going to go from, you went from Dave, who was the party guy, then you went to Sam, who was the gnarly vocalist, and the serious guy. How are you going to go back to Dave's party songs and his limited vocal range? He can't hit those notes. But if you listen to those songs, first of all, he's got a whole nother like half an octave that he never had before.
Yeah.
And he was singing in different ranges and stuff, which didn't really translate well to the stage because he wasn't really able to pull some of those songs off. But when you listen to a song like Chinatown or things like that, he's like, you want somebody to hit some high notes? I got you, And he brought his classic wit, his classic zen. Some of those lyrics you got to listen to 4 or 5 times before you really listen to, that's what he was saying. I mean, his stuff is a lot deeper than most people think. And those albums rock. That album right there, it had a lot of demos from the original stuff. So it went back to the original formula. Because they had come off of Van Halen 3 with Gary Cerrone, and that was a disaster. That was the last album they had made, And I mean, obviously they had a reunion with Sam tour, but as far as albums go, and they had to get back to what made Van Halen great. And that was Eddie writes the music, him and his brother demo it, with or without Mike, which without this time, but Eddie makes the music, him and his brother demo it, then they give it to Dave, Dave writes the lyrics. They reversed the process on Van Halen 3.
Yeah.
What they did then was he had all this book of like lyrics and poetry and stuff from Gary Cerrone of Extreme, and he would take those words and be inspired and write music to them.
Yeah.
And it didn't sound the same. It didn't feel the same. it should have been an Eddie Van Halen solo album, and people would have loved it because they were great songs, but they weren't great Van Halen songs. So when they went back to the well with Dave, first thing he did was, well, let me go grab some of the old demos. And interestingly enough, one of those songs, a song called Voodoo Queen, was half of the original demo recipe that went into the song Mean Streets.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
So if you listen to that, that was actually Voodoo Queen, and there was another song, I forget what it was called. She's the Woman, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those two songs together were combined to make Mean Street, I think. Something like that.
And I think, you know, the controversy.
He just scrapped all of his original lyrics and made everything brand new, and it was just a smoking hot album.
Yeah, and I think the controversy at the time was people, okay, Van Halen's finally back with Dave. People wanting, they had that dream that they were going to go back to the studio and start writing some fresh material. And like you said, for a lot of reasons, it just couldn't happen. And then I think
well, they couldn't get along. They couldn't hang in the studio for that long of a time.
Yeah. And then there was the added thing about, you know, Michael Anthony not being in the band, being kicked out so Wolfgang can come in. And
I missed his vocals on that album, but I'll tell you, that kid, his bass playing kicks major ass. As a drummer myself, I'm telling you, I love Michael Anthony, and I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, but I feel like that bass playing was every bit as good as anything that's ever been on a Van Halen album, maybe even more so. It really grew, and his dad actually turned it up so you could hear the bass.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of probably believe it or not, my favorite track off that album, which is very underrated. A lot of people don't give it the cred that it should. You and Your Blues.
Oh yeah. And that was totally written new for the new album. So there you go. You wanted new stuff? There it was. And it was awesome.
I love that too.
It just, the lyrics and the emotion in that song. Love it. You know? And
Tattoo too. That's probably another great track off that album that I really love. A lot of people.
Let's talk about that song a minute. Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of people don't love it, but I think it's totally a Dave tune. I mean, I could see it very much going on a Dave solo album, but I think this was a great vehicle for it. I'm glad it was like the lead-off track, because it's kind of
to listen to it.
A radio-friendly kind of tune. I think is one of the easier tracks for people to get into. Yeah.
And people always gave them shit about, man, it sounds like the weakest album or song on the album, or it's kind of slow. Why wouldn't you start off with something faster or more rocking? I'll tell you why. Because do you want the album to sell, or do you want a song to sell? You know what I mean? And in this age of digital downloads, if you're planning on having the whole album do well for more than just the one song or the first video, then you better start off with your weakest link. Because that way it continues to build, and it's like, oh man, every song gets better and better.
Sure.
So that's why I think what they did. They started off with something that you could strut to. You know what I mean? You walk out and you can just feel them just walking slow and strutting out, you know? And then it gets faster and more rocking. I think it was a great way to go. I didn't get it at first.
Yeah.
And
Took a few listens.
To the song about 5 times before I got the song. But now I don't listen to that song or that album without playing that song first. I have to hear it.
And you know another great song? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Stay Frosty. I love that. It's kind of like a modern day Ice Cream Man.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, big time. And if you listen to the lyrics, it's pretty deep, isn't it? You know, trust in Allah, but tie up your camel, you know, or God is love, but get it in writing. You know, I mean, I love it. You know, I love it. It's typical Dave Zen lyrics. You know, they fly over most people's heads, you know.
And as Van Halen fans, we had the dream of the band getting back together, and they finally did with Dave. And it's like, now we know that they weren't the best of friends, but they were able to long enough put their differences aside to put out that killer album, A Different Kind of Truth, and they delivered the goods, I think, and that's the final studio album by Van Halen. So
and people got to hear his genius one last time.
Yeah, you get, that's his final chapter, if you will, of Van Halen, and that's the last
great album it was.
Yeah, and I gotta get back to my number 5 real quick, For Unlawful Carnal. The other reason I included that was because it was the last album where I think it was all happiness in the band. I mean, the guys were still loving each other before they turned on one another. So there's that. And
Yeah.
so you were saying now about a different kind of truth.
Oh, I just, I love that album. And I tell you, if let's say the Sammy Hagar, you extract that out as
Yeah.
a separate band, as it may
Yeah.
have should have been anyways, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I would have been down with calling the band Hagar, but I get why they didn't. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if you extracted all that out and just looked at the Van Halen category or catalog with Roth,
Yeah.
if you put that album right after 1984, it fits.
Sure. Sure.
It fits. That could have been the 7 Van Halen albums, the original 6-pack and that, and it fits and it deserves its place in that canon. And that's why it's on my top 5.
And now my number 4, I know is going to be a little bit controversial for many people.
What's your top 4?
I'm going to go with Diver Down. I'll tell you why. It's
the covers album.
Yeah. But like, let's talk about some of those covers. Oh, Pretty Woman. I dig that. I mean, of course, originally done and written by Roy Orbison, but they really, I think Van Halen did up, if you know what I mean. And I mean, that's one of those songs you constantly hear by Van Halen on the radio. And I know that a lot of people give Dave grief, like, it's Dave's cover album, but I think
really,
at the
they
time,
only have three covers on there.
Yeah,
Where All the Good Times Gone,
yeah.
Dancing in the Street, and Pretty Woman. But then
Yeah.
again, you also have Little Guitars.
Little Guitars. That's also why I included that. That was one of my favorite tracks off of this album. And interestingly enough, this is kind of when the rift, I think, between Dave and Ed started to happen, because when they put out the next album,
Fair Warning.
Fair Warning, that was kind of Eddie's album, his answer to that.
Yeah.
Or actually, that
And he
came
got
out
really
before
mad
Diver
when it
Down.
didn't do as well.
Yeah. And but that was kind of Eddie's answer to what Roth was doing at the time. And so so that's why I included that. I like some you mentioned Where Have All the Good Times Gone, Dancing in the Streets. I love those. They're kind of like fun songs. So those
Secrets, Cathedral. Oh man,
there you go.
It sounds like someone's playing an oboe.
Yeah.
And he come to find out it's just another thing with Ed. He's like, every single album, he was like, "Hey, you've never seen a guitar play this, did you?" And then on this one, there was 2 of them. There was the Little Guitars intro, which is like a flamenco thing.
Sure,
it's like,
sure.
You never heard me play flamenco before, did you? But here it is. I can do that too.
Yeah,
and he's like,
yeah.
Oh, you want me hearing the guitar sound like an oboe?
Sure.
I can do that too. I mean, every time he just blew our mind with something he could do with that guitar.
Okay, now I can't wait to hear your number 3 album.
My number 3 is one of your number. I think it was what was your number 5?
For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge.
That's my number 3. My number 3 is For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. I liked the Sammy stuff. I was on board. I was 16 when 5150 came out. I had a boom box, little, I had where kids, a boom box is a radio. Kids, a radio is a thing with speakers. It's like an MP3 player, but it's big. Okay. And you can get radio. There's these things called cassettes, right? And I had a cassette of 5150, and I would literally walk around. I lived in San Miguel, California. I remember it. I was 16 years old. It's also the first year that I got laid. I loved San Miguel. So I don't know if it was Van Halen or if it was the town that made a man out of me. Could have been both. Thank you, Van Halen, either way. But I used to have I'm not trying to show off my guns, by the way. But I would carry my radio just like this, so my speaker would be right up against my ear, and I would walk around like that all the time, as we did back then, right? I'm sure you had one too, And some of them, like my brother had a big one. He would have to have his arm way up here. Not big. But you still carried it, so the speakers, because we didn't want any pussy-ass headphones, which were those big things that the skateboarders were. No. If we were going to listen to loud music in public, so were you. So we get a big.
There you go. Yeah.
And I would listen to that album all the time. And then when OU 812 came out, I thought that was great too. But I thought they really hit their stride with that album. I mean, because 50 was great, but I thought the production sound was too thin. I thought you could have used a lot more bottom end, a lot more Mike Anthony's fingers, but it was what it was. I'll
Yeah,
tell
and
you, man.
by the
Falling
time
off
that album
apart with
came out, there's 3 albums into with Sammy. People have accepted he's a singer at that point. Um,
yeah,
okay, my number 3 is Van Halen 2. No need to really talk about that. We kind of already talked about, but I will say again, I chose that because I thought it was a decent follow up to Van Halen 1.
yeah, oh,
And
yeah.
again, my go to Van Halen song, "Dance the Night Away." Never go wrong with that. "Beautiful Girls." That's another great track off that.
Yep.
Now let's get into your number 2.
Well, my number 2 is Van Halen 1.
There you go. Yeah.
Probably one of the, well, not probably, one of the greatest debut albums
Of
any
all time.
band all time. I mean, we could argue Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses, Van Halen 1. I think they occupy the exact same space in the hearts of each of their respective generations.
Yeah.
Because I don't think in the time of Guns N' Roses coming out that you can find a better hard rock debut album than that. And I think for the 70s, I don't think you're going to find a better hard rock guitar-based album debut from a band than Van Halen 1. Every single song is something we can all listen to. Every single song is just amazing. Just from the opening. Okay, yeah, they got famous off their cover, but that was actually released as a single before the album came out. Because story goes, and I'm going to get it wrong, but story goes is they were just getting ready to do it, and word was getting out, and someone else was going to do it too. And so they went in the studio real fast and handled it and released it maybe as a single or something. I hear it maybe. I don't know. But I remember where I was when I first heard that album start to play. It was 78, right? I was obviously 8 years old. I was in Niagara Falls, New York, where I lived till I was 12.
Yeah.
We were in a lime green Chevy Nova. One of my brother's friends, Mike something or other. We were in his lime green Chevy Nova. It had a rust hole underneath the floor mat of the passenger seat. And if you took up the floor mat, you could see the ground. You know, it's upstate New York, man. I mean, we had nothing. This was a blue collar town beyond. We weren't even up to, like, Buffalo, New York was higher class than us. You know what I mean? Because at least they had a team. So I remember sitting in there. My brother was in the front seat. I was in the back seat. Mike Young,
Hey, Mike
Jr.
Young.
Hi, Mike. And so we were in Mike's car, and we're trying to wait for the windows to defrost because it was wintertime. And then all of a sudden you hear the car horn, and I thought it was Mike's car horn. He goes, "No, it's the radio. Just listen." And then you hear that bump, 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 bump. And the very first song I ever heard from that album was "Running with the Devil."
Of course.
My life was never the same. I mean, that album was just ridiculous. I mean, Atomic Punk? Are you kidding me?
And I'll just say this about the cover of the Kinks. You really got me. At this point, anybody listening to this, they think it is a Van Halen song. That's how much this band owns that song. People forget about the Kinks, that it was a Kinks song. So enough said. This was actually my number 1 for all the reasons you said. I mean, from top to bottom, it's just a great album.
All killer, no filler, not even an ounce of filler. Every single song is something you can rock out listening to and you won't skip. You know, I mean, For Your Love Tonight, I'm the One. My Van Halen, the Van Halen tribute band that I am in, Light Up the Sky, with Casey, and we've got Eddie Vasquez playing keyboards. And actually, we're so lucky that our keyboard player, Eddie, no pun intended, literally, the guy's name is Eddie, right? He's so damn good as an instrumentalist. He also plays guitar, but not just guitar like, oh, he can whip out Born to Be Wild, but he's really good at keyboards, right? No. This man can play Hot for Teacher and has done so at one of our shows. I mean, has done so in the studio too. He can complete with the intro and everything. So it's not like he can play some guitar, but he's really a good keyboard player. No, everybody in our band is just top notch, you know? So, I mean, you've got Casey on guitar, you got Eddie on keyboards, and Casey's drummer, Adam West. Yes, folks, we have Batman as our drummer.
Yeah, yeah.
So Adam West is our drummer. He plays drums in Monarch with Casey. They're an amazing metal band out of San Diego. And this guy just rips the drums, dude. I mean, you know, you need somebody that's next level when you're playing this music.
Hey, Jason, we're going to have to wrap it up because believe it or not, we're running out of time. But I will just say, as we're doing so, my number 2, Women and Children First, and the Cradle Will Rock. Everybody wants them. Enough said, my friend. This is going to go up.
What's your number 1?
My number 1 was Van Halen 1, of course. So
my number 1 is 1984.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, it's just the biggest stuff. It was really when I first started buying albums. You know what I mean? And so you had Jump.
Yeah, that's it.
Biggest Van Halen song of all time. And I wasn't fazed that they had keyboards. You know, when I was listening to Van Halen 1, I was listening to it because my brother and his friends were listening to it. You know, I was like 8 years old, so I wasn't going and getting my own records, you know.
Okay, okay.
That was the first one that I felt like that was mine. You know what I mean?
Jason, in closing, I think what we're going to do is I got the great idea. Next time, let's do an episode in the future on the debut Van Halen and the debut Montrose.
I like that idea,
brother. I will see you later. Bye-bye.
Rock and roll, people.